I appreciated this opportunity to speak with Riel, who is struggling with long COVID and chronic fatigue, which has kept her off the stage. She shares her experiences as both a writer and performer, growing up with parents in the arts, touring with an actual horse and wagon traveling theater company, which is not an everyday kind of a thing. And she talks about what it meant to her to discover and share her most integrated self on the stage while managing quite crippling stage fright. But here's my conversation with Riel. There's absolutely zero expectation, zero pressure, zero anything.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I'll try not to cry.
It's a podcast about vulnerability. It's like okay to cry.
The last couple of months, it's been hard to have any conversations without crying. And in fact, it's not even just conversations, but I find that opening my mouth to make sound and crying comes quite a lot of the time. I mean, I've always been a big crier, like always been a big crier. Every single emotion I experience gets expressed through tears.
I'm almost a little bit jealous in a way because I'm not a crier, really. And those times when I should be crying and I kind of would be crying, I'm not crying. And so I just kind of look at the people who are able to release their emotion like that and just imagine, I'm sure there is some kind of release at the end. It's a good cry.
Well, I have a few things to say about that, if you don't mind.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm speaking with Riel. I have the great, well, I know I bungle this every time. So it'll probably just be like this. We'll just keep it like this. But I am really looking forward to speaking with you, Riel, today to learn more about you as a performer and as a writer and as a person. So thank you so much for taking time to talk with me. I do appreciate it a lot.
Oh, thanks for asking me. I get a lot of juice out of being wanted. So
excellent.
So a couple of things about crying. Firstly, I remember my old friend David used to read Omni magazine all the time. All kinds of science magazines and science-ish magazines, and then report all of his findings to everybody, which I really appreciated. And he called me one time to let me know that they had done studies and that tears were full of stress hormones. And so it was the most efficient way to move things through your body. And I really appreciated that, having been such a crier. And it runs in the family. My mother is also a crier. Would always used to be a joke in our family back when there was television that everyone watched together and commercials. And she would cry at long distance commercials or diaper commercials. And we joke about it, but then I inherited that too. And she once went to her doctor because she was like, I cry all the time. What do I do? And he was like, he laughed and was like, go home. I have people in here all day, every day who can't cry. You're doing great. You're so healthy.
Nice.
And then recently, I was having a visit with an old friend, a man in his mid-50s. I feel like those are important points of information about this little story. And we were talking about emotions and crying, or I might have even been crying, who knows. And he said he doesn't cry. And we talked about some incidences in his life. And he was like, no, I didn't cry then. And I can't cry. And I don't cry. I was like, oh, that's so interesting. And then he paused and he said, there was this one time recently, I was at a concert and the music was really beautiful and I felt very moved. It was so wonderful. And after a couple of minutes, I reached up and I realized there was water coming from my eyes. And I said, oh. And he said, is that crying? I went, wait, what? Yes, there's tears coming out of your eyes. That's crying. He's like, wait. So if there's tears coming when you're happy, that's also crying? I was like, how did you get to be a grown-up middle-aged man? I was gentle with him. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, oh, I guess I have cried. Anyway, I thought that was very dear.
Imagine only having ever cried from happiness.
Mm,
That's
yeah,
pretty
also that.
unusual.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that intro through crying. It's topical, can be for vulnerability and life experiences and art. So I'm going to take a step back and go to your roots. I think might be your roots, but actually I'm not sure if you first started performing or writing, or are there other things that you do in the art realm that I don't even know about yet?
I don't remember a time in my life where I didn't think I was a writer. From about age 2.5. My dad was a writer and he taught me how to read I could read when I was 3. And there was a writer brain happening. There's some family lore. Like when I was about 2, my mother and her friend asked me what I thought love was. And I said that love is a candle with wings. And yeah, I've just always been like this. And my family were in the arts. My mother is a designer and my father was a playwright and novelist. And my stepfather was an actor and a dancer who then went on to do directing and then went into film and television. So it just was always around. And we started touring with a traveling theater company that traveled from town to town by horse and wagon when I was 3 or so. And so I was surrounded. Your face right now is so great.
I had this Station 11 moment. Like I'm visualizing from the book, and then I was like, wow, by
It's so
caravan.
interesting because Station 11 is the first novel. It's the first piece of art, other than maybe Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead because they have the wonderful traveling actors in that show. But it's the first piece of art where I felt like, whoa, a thing that happened to me in my life for so much of my life was real. Somebody else knew about it. And she grew up in BC, that author. So I think that she knew about, when I was little, it was called the Caravan Stage Company, and it evolved to become the Caravan Farm Theater. But all my life, it always felt like a fake thing that happened to me because no one could believe that it was real. But it meant that I grew up with performers all around me all the time, writers, performers, musicians, dancers, lunatics. And I've been thinking since I asked me, since I asked you if I could come on your podcast.
It was a mutual thing. You might have spoken first, but the intention was there.
I've been thinking about your question of when did I first go on stage? What was my first experience as a performer? And I don't totally remember because we were in the shows very often. And also every summer we did a kids version of the full length show for all the cast and crew. But before that, this is, for me, it's not a real performance, but for me, it starts everything. Again, I was about 2.5. I was quite a I guess, a bit of a precocious child, even though I remember being extremely shy. And we were at dinner with another family that we know, and another Jewish family. We're all Jewish, which is important to the story. And I was seated next to the patriarch of that family, who was a Supreme Court justice. And he was chatting with me, and he said, "Oh, Riel, that's an unusual name." And I stood up on my chair next to him and turned to face him, and the whole table got quiet. And I said, "Yes, there are only two other Riels, Louis Riel and Israel." And I got an enormous laugh. And that's, as far as I know, my first joke I ever wrote. And maybe one of my first really big laughs. And it really stuck. And my next real memory of being on stage is at one of those kids' versions of the show. I was 6. All the girls wanted the part of Vida in this show. She got to wear this incredible costume that my mother had designed and sing this beautiful solo. And I practiced and practiced and practiced. And I was so excited that I got that because Corey also wanted it. And she was a little bit older than me. And the boy I liked Corey. And I wanted the part. And I got the part. And I got out there during the show. I got scooted out onto stage to sing my solo. And I opened my mouth and nothing came out. And I froze in abject terror, looking out at all the grown-ups. And they started clapping and encouraging me. And the more they yelled and hollered and whooped, the more frightened I got, until somebody had to come and gently guide me off the stage. And Corey popped out and sang the song.
Oh, no.
Terrible. This is terrible.
How could that not turn you off performing? You're so brave. You went back out after that at some point.
It's an interesting question how that could not turn me off. It didn't turn me off, but I have contended with crippling stage fright my whole career. I managed to get in high school. I had trouble because I would get on stage and my upper lip would start trembling uncontrollably. And I have those tics under control now, but I still go into like a crazed fever for days before a performance. And it's a weird, I think it hasn't done my nervous system a lot of good. And yet it feels so bad to not be on stage in some fashion.
Yeah, I don't totally get that. So there's the two obvious things, right? The one obvious thing is I haven't seen you on stage, but I've seen you in groups and I've seen you read your stuff, and there is not any whisper of nerves or anything. Nothing shows.
When I'm doing something like comedy or hosting or whatever, people who work with me a lot know that I have a really intense pre-show process, and we work out little ways of communicating. But the second I set foot on the stage now, the second I'm on that stage and the microphone's in my hand, the fear doesn't exist. It's all preamble. It's just this gathering. It's like a gathering of the energy. And I haven't figured out a way to make it not feel like I'm very, very nervous. And I know that once I'm on stage, I won't be going like, oh, I wish a truck would hit me on the way to the show, which is always when I'm going, maybe I'll break my leg. Maybe I'll, I won't have to do it. But I know the feeling afterwards is worth it.
I guess because that would be the second obvious thing is why do you put yourself through this if it's so challenging, except that you're drawn to do it, I guess, at the same time as you're wishing a truck hit you on the way because of the feeling during and after, I guess. It's the accomplishment or it's the adrenaline or it's the sense of purpose, maybe, or fit.
Those things are all, sure. Yeah, it's all those things. But more than that, it's a compulsion. And I've found that with, I don't know all kinds of performers, but I feel that comedians especially, it's a bit of a sickness. In the way, like, there have been times in my life where I thought it's too much, it's too much for my nervous system to continue putting myself through this over and over and over again. And maybe it is, but it's worse when I don't do it. It's much, much worse. My mental health suffers. My behaviors can become self-destructive. I do you mind if I get a little bit, I don't know, graphic? Or I found over a lot of my life that if I was doing shows very regularly, and I would just like to say that as we're talking, it makes me feel better.
Okay, good. Okay.
Whatever the weird mechanisms are in me around the long COVID and MECFS, I don't understand them, but
In one small way, maybe at the moment you are performing and performing is a good feel for you. So maybe that brings you the good juju or whatever it is that helps during the day.
Yeah, and I think it's probably focusing me off of, like, I was very, very focused on my breath and it was freaking me out. It was just starting to make, because sometimes when I focus too much on my breath, it's like I think I don't remember how to breathe. And then, anyway, the body's a complex little place. Okay, so something that I noticed when I would try to extricate myself from being a performer, be like, there must be another life that I can have, one that is more lucrative, offers more security and stability and calmness. And so take a break, try doing something else. I would notice when I'm not doing shows, I would be ravenous for sex and seeking out sexual partners all the time. And it was like a hunger that couldn't be slaked. Wait, can you slake a hunger or do you just slake a thirst?
I think you slake a thirst. I think you might just satisfy a hunger.
Well, it couldn't be
But
satisfied.
that's an unsatisfiable hunger.
And then when I would start doing shows regularly again, I had very, it wasn't just sex, actually, it was companionship. Like, I would get caught up in thinking I needed to find a person, a partner, like what my life was kind of empty without, and then get back on stage and have very little need for that kind of companionship. Like, they're serving later in life, the kind of personal work that I've been doing, I believe that they were filling the same need, which was a deep well of never being loved enough. That I just couldn't fill it with enough love. And I always thought it had to come from the outside. And I assume that's from being raised in the way that I was, and just how I felt not seen, heard, tended to.
Yeah, I didn't want to, and we don't have to go there, but there was a very clear, I mean, if you grew up in a family of performers and those are your associations with performing and feeling loved and satisfied and not alone, then those things seem intimately connected to your growing up in a certain life with a certain family. And we don't need to go anywhere near that. But it's interesting to for you to reflect on that, I'm sure, and just try to see how what are the healthiest ways. And that's not that it's sex is unhealthy or healthy. It's not about that, but it's interesting that they're interchangeable in a way that they give you the same sense of fulfillment or excitement or satisfaction of some kind.
I wonder, there's something else, another piece of that too, which is getting out of my head and into my body, and how much I need that. Because as so many people are discovering late in life at this moment in history, I believe I have ADHD, and it's been undealt with my whole life. When I do the tests or look up the lists or whatever, it's like 98% me. Like, oh, wow, it is bang on. No wonder. And so my thoughts are just racing, spinning, tumbling, trying to get out in words, trying to get out in, and there's a million things going on in my brain all the time. But if I am having sex or swimming, or if I'm on stage with an audience, you got to get super present in your body. And every time I come back to the body, I just ground really fast. But it's a constant practice.
In my very uninformed, completely uninformed opinion, I think some of that ADHD can be in some people a function of the culture that we live in right now, where our senses are bombarded a million times a minute with all kinds of input from everywhere, from inside, but especially from outside, with media, with images, with all kinds of information that's being thrown at us all the time. And we're not built for that. Like, as human beings, we didn't evolve. We're not evolving fast enough to keep up with the pace of how our environment around us is changing. So I think that has an effect on a lot of people. And the thing about the grounding in the body that's fascinating too is, I mean, it is to me, is the distinction. We make so many distinctions, so many binary oppositions. It's this or it's this. It's mind or it's body. It's I'm in my head or I'm physically in my body. As just one example of it. So, I would say that, let's say when you're performing, you're both. You're integrated because you're in your body, and you're following instinctual cues, physical cues, but you're also very much tracking where you are in your performance in whatever story, if it's a stand-up comedy show or some other kind of performance. So it's that full body, mind, everything, one thing is fully integrated. That's cool. Now maybe that's performing.
It is for me. My late stepfather is one of the guys that started the Vancouver Theatre Sports League. And I started taking classes in improv when I was 7. And Friday nights at 11:30, from the time I was about 7, I'd go to the theater with him and watch theater sports. And I worked with the same group of kids from when we were about 7 to 17. So we got very, very intimately familiar with each other, and it was a really beautiful way into being an improviser, is to feel very safe and trusting with a group of people. And when I was about 15, I got somewhere in my body this notion that I wanted to do stand-up comedy. And I didn't start that for many, many more years. But all the while that I was doing improv, and then when I first started doing stand-up, there was something that I was seeking out, and I didn't know how to name it at first. And I kept thinking there's a magic formula that I'm after when I know I'm going to get good. And then it became obvious to me that what I wanted to do as a stand-up was bridge the gap between who I was in the world and who I was on stage. And I felt when those two things came together, then I would really hit my stride. But I didn't also necessarily think, well, that means I better find out who I am in the world. But that happens anyway. And when I started to do a lot more personal work, this word integrating came up quite a bit. And a lot of my work has been about integrating my systems. And I've often thought of my brain and myself as separate entities, and I talk about them in that way. And now I actually can't even totally identify what was disintegrated about my system, because now I do feel like one whole thing, and it's kind of a miracle. And when that started to happen, it did change my stage presence. And I was like, yeah, this was it. This is what I knew would happen. So even though I get very, very nervous beforehand, I have a deep body trust that if you put a microphone in my hand and I open my mouth, something will happen. I don't know where this life is going to go. I'm not having the life I expected or set up for myself. And it's a long road ahead of me of re-knowing who I am on the planet and what my capacity is. Thinking about the word vulnerable right now in relationship to identity, and having a really mushy identity right now is a very vulnerable experience. I feel sort of susceptible. Yeah, like I could be buffeted around a bit right now by ideas of identity. And there's a little nugget of certainty about who I am that got shook loose from its nesting place, and it's floating around loose right now.
Take care, Riel, and have some good rest and some good whatever you're looking for today, some of that.
Thank you.